Alright, so I had to split this video up into two. Sorry about that. I had trouble loading. Anyway, I'll move on to the second section. Humanism was an intellectual movement that emphasized the study of the subjects known as the liberal arts or the humanities, including grammar, logic, poetry, philosophy, and history. Students of humanist teachers took classes in which they learned Greek and Latin and studied Greek and Roman literature, philosophy, and history to learn how to be knowledgeable scholars, public speakers, and politicians. After reading this section, please answer, what subjects do you currently study in school that you think would be considered the humanities? So just think of the types of subjects that embody these characteristics. So take a moment, go back, and then you can move on to the next section. And lastly for today, we'll read this section. The emphasis on the individual. People in the Renaissance celebrated individuals for their achievements. They were especially impressed by the Homo universalis, or the universal people, or what is known as the Renaissance man. Renaissance men were well-rounded and accomplished in all fields. The ideal person was a well-educated humanist, an artist, a scientist, an inventor, a musician, and had impressive physical abilities. The emphasis on the individual is also apparent in Renaissance art. Artists studied Greek and Roman sculpture and studied anatomy, so they could create realistic and later idealized or perfect versions of the human form in sculptures and paintings. Let me just underline that. After reading this section, please think. Identify someone who, in the modern world, would be considered a Renaissance person, a Renaissance man or woman, a Renaissance individual. Think of the characteristics that embodied a Renaissance man. Why did you pick that person? What characteristics about this modern day individual made you think that they were a Renaissance person? So take a few moments, think, and then write. And remember, whenever there are terms you don't know, you need to, in the text, please type in a definition for annotation credit. Once you've finished all those questions, you can close the document, it'll save it, and open it up tomorrow and continue this video. I'm just going to continue, so you'll need to reopen this video up tomorrow in order to have me read these next few. Okay, day 2. Celebration of secular achievements. During the Middle Ages, Europeans were most concerned with living their lives so they would go to heaven and not hell. During the Renaissance, they studied Greek and Roman philosophers, most of whom wrote before the Catholic Church existed or before it had so much power in Europe. Renaissance writers, artists, and scientists shifted their focus from celebrating God to celebrating secular or non-religious academic, artistic, and political achievements that were of this world and not the next. The Catholic Church was still a very important part of European culture, but whereas in the Middle Ages, most art was funded by the Church, during the Renaissance, artists and writers were funded by both the Church and private individuals. During the Middle Ages, artists created work that were about religious subjects, but during the Renaissance, writers and artists explored both religious subjects and secular topics of their world like philosophy, politics, literature, and science. During the Middle Ages, most art was in cathedrals, right, Catholic churches. During the Renaissance, paintings and sculptures were created for churches and public spaces. Architecture in the Middle Ages was mostly building Gothic cathedrals, but during the Renaissance, building projects were both religious and civic, or having to do with the government. So please answer, what does secular mean in your own words? It can come from this document or the notes from yesterday. What is an example of a secular book or a secular movie that you enjoy? And how do you know it's secular? So again, you really have to know what that definition of secular is. And if you don't, then reach out. And once you've read that section or reread that section, I want you to compare the Renaissance with the Middle Ages. So, for example, during the Middle Ages, what were some of the topics that artists focused on? And during the Renaissance, what changed? What were some of the topics that art focused on during that period? Right, so you're going to have to go back into the section and see what the differences were between the lifestyle or the things that were considered important during the Middle Ages and the change and how and what then was considered important during the Renaissance. Right, so please take some time and get that done. Have a good one.